Hello, folks, and welcome to another edition of the Dr. Mark Foster Show. Today, my main focus will be on a wonderful story of human contact with angels. But first, I wanted to mention a few other things. First, my writing. One of my books, which is the Unific Evolution book, I decided that it was simply too long. It had now gotten to the point where it was almost 1,300 pages. So I decided to take the book and divide it up into 6 other books. One is the original book, Unific Evolution. And then there are 5 others. There will be links to all of those books right below this program. They are all still in a process of being worked on. I will continue working on them for the duration of the summer and most likely beyond then as well. Second, we have been having a lot of rocking and rolling in the world, last few days especially. A lot of earthquakes, volcanic activity, meteor showers, fireballs, that horrendous tornado in Oklahoma that basically destroyed an entire town and killed just under 24 people. So really some frightening stuff. It reminded me of the statement by Baha'u'llah, "The world's equilibrium hath been upset through the vibrating influence of this most great, this new world order. Mankind's ordered life hath been revolutionized through the agency of this unique, this wondrous system, the like of which mortal eyes have never witnessed." The spiritual fulfillment of that statement, or perhaps prophecy, was made with, I think, the revelation of Baha'u'llah. When Baha'u'llah announced the coming of the New World Order, and it continued to accelerate throughout the ministry of Baha'u'llah, throughout the ministry of Abdu'l-Baha, Shoghi Effendi, and now, since 1963, with the Universal House of Justice. But I think on a purely physical, or perhaps geological level, this shaking, this process of disequilibrium really just started. We are in the early phases now, I think, of that disequilibrating. I think it will perhaps, in this, again, I'm only speculating, which is what I always only do. I think it will probably go on for a number of years. How many, I don't know. But my sense is, and this is only my own intuition, is that we have started with it. We have started. Literally just started. My feeling is that the years up until 2012, when Abdu'l-Baha made his historic trip to the West, including North America, we had the 100 years since that date last year. From 1912 to 2012. Perhaps, and again, more speculation or conjecture, perhaps that was something like a respite And it seems to me that with the end of 2012, the respite is over. When Abdu'l-Baha was in the United States and Canada and Europe, he warned people, he warned Westerners about materialism. He warned Americans, in particular, about racism. The word racism, in fact, was coined by Leon Trotsky in Russia with specific reference to the American plantation system. So Abdu'l-Baha was aware of that already. And he warned us. Well, perhaps we've made some progress. We have an African American president in the United States. We have had various voter rights acts, beginning with the administration of Lyndon Johnson, President Lyndon Johnson. We've had other civil rights acts enacted. But there is still tremendous inequality. The condition of America's prisons still disproportionately minority, and in particular African American and Latino. So we still have not really addressed the tremendous inequalities which exist in this country, although some people have tried with varying degrees of success. Our materialism has proliferated. The stark differences between the standard of living in the United States and in other Western countries and the standard of living in many third world or developing nations is horrific. People in North Korea, people in Haiti, people in many countries in Africa, certain parts of Latin America, the Caribbean, living in tremendous poverty, chronic poverty, with literally no prospect, no foreseeable prospect of seeing it end. Just a complete life of hopelessness, utter hopelessness. And yet, in the Western world, most people are largely blind to that, tolerate it even, or don't think about it, and instead of being concerned for the suffering of people in other countries, complain about so-called illegal immigration. Totally unbalanced priorities. Pure evil, in my view. Just pure evil. There's simply no excuse for that kind of behavior. How we have been treating the least unfortunate among us, and by among us I don't mean in our own countries, but in the entire human race. That is a measure of who we are as human souls. Many people are terrified of a new world order. They see it as conspiratorial. Well, I can tell you this. When I traveled to Central Africa, I remember that many people I met in Central Africa could care less what country they were in. They didn't care what country they were in. They cared about their tribe. Countries were simply inconveniences, which sometimes prevented them from working with other members of their tribe. There are similar kinds of situations in North America, where a tribe or nation is divided between the United States and Canada, and the people in those tribes are more interested in their tribe than they are in in which country they're in. So it's not only nations that have difficulty seeing beyond nations, but some tribes have difficulty seeing beyond tribes. We will, however, make that step at some point, but it will, I think, be very difficult. And this rocking and shaking is, I think, the beginning of these problems, and I think we'll see more of it or something else. The disintegration, or as I prefer, the unraveling, the great unraveling of the old world order will continue. We have to become aware of the fact of this tremendous disparity in income between us in the Western world and people who have no chance of ever even connecting to the internet. Now I want to get to the major topic of this program, and that is the subject of emancipation, and in particular, emancipation through angelic contact. I had the realization just recently that when I was talking about contact with angels, that really what I was doing is I was discussing something like emancipation as that term is commonly used in my field of sociology. Let me explain. Emancipation has its roots, the concept, in Marxism, although not everyone who talks about emancipation in sociology is necessarily a Marxist. For example, in the United States, President Lincoln, who obviously was not a Marxist, signed the Emancipation Proclamation freeing the slaves. Emancipation has that same kind of flavor in sociology. The idea is that there are some people who are subjects of domination, or objects, I should say, of domination. And consequently, there are also some people who are dominators. But it's not that simple. It isn't just a matter of us and them, or as people in the Occupy movement conceived it, the 1% versus the 99%. That's easy, but it's not academic. There are layers upon layers of inequality in any society. A person who occupies a position of dominance in one status might occupy a position of being dominated or oppressed in another. Consequently, when we talk about oppression or domination, typically in sociology, we're not talking about people per se, but we're talking about social statuses that people occupy. In other words, a much more, I would say, sophisticated or precise way of viewing the issue of social inequality than perhaps most people who are not academically trained use. That said, I began looking at contact experiences recently as a type of emancipation. Emancipation by angels. I've realized that, for example, is what I personally experienced through my contact with my guardian angel Sultan Bahu, I believe that through that contact, I was emancipated from many of the horrendous consequences of being an autistic. There are some positive aspects of autism as well, such as an ability to be analytical, to be good in subjects that require tremendous dedication to something. But I think those advantages are far outweighed by the sense of personal alienation and lack of empathy which most autistics have and feel, and which I myself felt, and which I didn't realize that I felt until all of a sudden I had it. And I looked back and I thought, my goodness, now I know. Now I know why when I was a kid I asked myself, how is it that I literally don't love anybody? And I couldn't figure out why that was. But I didn't. I didn't love anybody. I had no sense of what love meant. Well, maybe what it meant in a purely intellectual sense, but not in an emotional sense. I had no connection with it. So that's what my contact experience with Sultan Bahu, my contact experience with Erin, who I think is a I know this sounds far-fetched, I realize that, who I think is an extraterrestrial or trans-terrestrial being. I think that is what that has done for me, is that it has brought me new connections. And I've noticed that people simply don't relate to me the same way. When I talk and communicate, I'm not getting the same sense that people aren't connecting with me. People connect with me, I connect with them. I get it. When people say something, I understand it. I have common sense now, which I never had. Not really, except in a very, very basic or superficial way, but I really had no common sense. I had no way of judging or evaluating what people meant when they did what they did, except through extreme intellectual analysis. And as a result, I often made a lot of mistakes. Now, here is the major inspiration for why I'm doing this. A few days ago, I came upon a story from KPHO TV and in Ohio, and it was titled, "Do You Believe? Holy Image Appears Behind Child Battling Leukemia." It was published on May 24th, so that was 3 days ago today. Then just today I saw another version of that same story that was in the Huffington Post. It was titled, "The Virgin Mary Apparition in Ohio. Ghostly Figure Appears in Photo Behind Erin Potter. Child Battling Leukemia." Well, that's really the heart of the story, that you had this kid who has been battling leukemia since 2007, and she was in the process of preparing for her second transplant, and all of a sudden she was running around outside and a photograph was snapped of her, just a little girl. And right behind her, you can see the figure of a dark-haired being with a very large forehead, wearing a kind of pink gown. Very loving, compassionate expression on her face. Then, just to the right of her, you see some orbs, or as I call them, chalices of pure light. So, as I wrote about in my book on emancipation, she was experiencing angelic contact from both departed angels, or orbs, and perhaps from a trans-terrestrial or extraterrestrial angel, this very apparent woman who was literally standing behind her. Beautiful picture. I will obviously include links to all this stuff directly below this program, but it's extremely inspiring, and I think the importance of it really cannot be understated. There is so much fear that many people have, who are interested in extraterrestrial subjects, of a kind of War of the Worlds scenario, an extraterrestrial invasion. I recall listening to this one fellow whose name I won't mention, it's not important, being interviewed on the radio show Coast to Coast AM by George Norrie. And what he said to Norrie at one point is, well, the reason why they are, quote unquote, abducting people is because they want to eat us. And Norrie, because Norrie is an entertainer, he's not a journalist, but Norrie didn't react. He just continued asking questions. Now, whether this fellow really believes this or not, or is simply looking for attention, or who knows, I can't read his mind. But it does reflect a certain kind of thinking or approach that many people take to these contact experiences, that these beings are to be feared, that they are terrifying, and we need to protect ourselves from them. There's one guy who has even claimed that he is waging a personal war against them because he feels that they are violating our civil liberties. So people who are very strongly libertarian, who are upset, who think that they are in danger of being abducted, who don't see these as contact experiences with wonderful souls from other worlds, are afraid. And then you look at the face in this dark-haired woman with the large forehead, a face of love and of compassion. That, I think, is a much better picture of what contact is all about. We do not need to be afraid of angels. There are no fallen angels in the common Christian sense of that term. The fallen angels, I think, were the pre-Adamites, the people who lived before Adam, they fell. But there are no fallen angels in the sense of demons. There are only angels who are loving beings that act, as Baha'u'llah said, as the pure leaven to leaven the world of being. It is through them that the arts and sciences of the world are made manifest. Those are the angels in the next world, in the supreme concourse, to use the Baha'i term. And then there are the angels from other planets or other dimensions who are looking out for us too. So my point is that fear is a non-starter. There is no need to be afraid. Instead of being afraid, we should be grateful for the fact that we are surrounded by God's love, by the love of all of God's prophets, by the love of angels in the next world as well as on other planets, people who only have our best interests at heart, and simply not to worry. Until next time, this is Dr. Mark Foster. Have a good one.